I'm just gonna share my screen.
Very good.
Okay. So the first question we had is how to use flow pathing and visualization to look at two different events.
Yeah, I dropped a couple things in here. Um, flow reports are really cool. You can use them for a variety of analytical purposes. And one of the new-ish, I think it's been around for like a year or so, but is that you can end with an event now or start with an event. But often it's really helpful to see, what are the paths people are taking to get to that end goal. So I just pulled a kind of easy example here. Catherine, do you want to open up the rule or, like the little pencil guy there? Yeah. So what I did here was just pull in online orders to that ends with space and put page as the pathing dimension there. Again, just pretty simple example, but that's one way you can look at like what pages led to online orders. Obviously, you can change the event or you can change the pathing dimension if you didn't want to look at page, but you wanted to look at something else instead. And then in the second one, just did the exact same thing, but just pulled in a different event to the end to look at, what did I pick here? Event registrations, like step one. So again, like you can imagine, there's lots of flexibility here. You can pull in whatever event is going to work, whatever pathing dimension is going to work. And then there's several advanced settings as well. Other champs, feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, no, I think it's an awesome feature. I think the flow is great because you can use multiple dimensions as well to get to that final event. So often I'll have people ask me things like, where do they come from? Or maybe you have multiple sites, right? And you can have like a site ID, then URL, then the thing they clicked on, all the way down to the event. The only downside is the more that you add to it, the more it seems to get slow, right? Or if you're going across a large period of time. So you can't go maybe too crazy with it, but you could get, I've had 6 different, steps in there, and it's just a really good detective tool.
Yep.
Cool. I realized that I'm sharing my screen. I don't have eyes on the chat. So I'm just going to pause a couple times throughout this and just peek in the chat to make sure we're good.
Yeah,
but
I'm checking as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Time spent. So time spent can be a challenging metric to work with in Adobe Analytics. This is the question. I'll zoom in a little. To improve accuracy, we apply segments to exclude single page visits and exit pages from our time spent calculations when analyzing a specific page. Do the analytics champs have recommendations on best practices for leveraging this data? Are there any customer implementations that could automatically provide a more accurate measure of time spent on page?
I can read through my notes here, and then if anyone else wants to chime in, please feel free to do so. So there's a couple different ways to break down time spent. There's like the granular, and then there's the bucketed way. I often use the bucketed way. I find that's sometimes more helpful. This is something I always kind of caution people with using the time spent metric. High or low could be good or bad, right? Customers could be spending a lot of time on the page because they're really engaged with the page and the content, or they could be spending a lot of time on the page because they're confused, or the UI is not intuitive, or it's not an efficient process and they're lost, right? So in that case, in that second case, time spent decreasing would probably be a good thing. So that's where, you'd want to bring in other analysis to understand the context of the time spent going up or down, and whether that's a helpful thing for your customers or an unhelpful thing for your customers. Something like we do, like we fire a timestamp when they first hit the page, and on any click items, that can be a helpful way to measure, particularly downstream if you have your data going into like a data warehouse, the engagement points with time. And then my team also developed a custom event called Customer Scrolled. Not necessarily time spent, but it does help us. So we fire that once per visit, because otherwise, right, it'd be going off all the time. But that's especially helpful with spa pages, and it also helps us determine engagement on a page. So we have some pretty lengthy article pages on vehicle research, and a customer could read through the entire article and spend 5 or 10 minutes on it. But if they didn't click on anything or go to another page, they would look like a bounce or an unengaged visitor. So we put that scroll metric in there to kind of like, okay, well, at least are they scrolling down the page? They're a little bit of a higher quality visit than just someone who bounces. And then also, like, if they bounce, that time metric doesn't really get captured. So that's a helpful way as well to help capture that metric. Those are some of the thoughts I had. Again, I think there's lots and lots of different ways to use this. So other chance, feel free to weigh in.
I'm just going to pull up what that time spent bucketed dimension looks like too.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Just another, like, I definitely agree with you here that it's like a double-edged sword. Time spent can be so subjective. Another metric that I like to use instead is like, I don't know if it's out of the box, but like page views per visit to get an indicator of our customers like spending a lot of quote unquote time on the website, and instead just looking at the number of pages that they're visiting.
Yeah. Another one is time on site. Folks may not realize that time on site, which is another one, actually is indicative of the dimensional object you're looking at. So like if you're looking at a specific page or a URL, it's not talking about the whole site visit, but the time that you spent on that dimensional item, whatever it is, whether it's path or URL. I think here we have page path. I was looking at that. And so you could see what, the average time spent is for the segment or audience you're looking at. That might be another way of going about seeing that information as well. Do you see it there? If you type in page, so page path, I think it is, or if you search the word path, is, at least what I use to see, like a piece of the URL, right? And then if you drop in time on site or average time on site, I think that's it right there. Looking at it on a tiny screen, so I can't be sure. Yeah, right. And so it should show information associated with the time that people are spending on average for the audience you're looking at. And the more refined your audience is, the more those get from really large, ambiguous numbers to your specific audience.
Cool. Anything else from anyone on time spent?
There's no chats at the moment.
Cool.
One of the things, Damon, also when you're getting into those kinds of analyses, one of the conversations that we'll get into also is looking at both entry traffic and cross traffic too, because that's something that you want to understand is with your time spent. are people, that's when you get into your investment around looking at your marketing channels, and as well as, are your people, the investment that you're putting into how people are actually getting to those pages as well. So not with the time spent that people are going to those pages. When they're coming in, are they going to those pages from within your site? Are they coming externally? So if they're just moving across pages, are they coming from outside? So doing that analysis, as well as how they're moving across. So cross site, so that those two different types of analyses are also valuable to do when you're doing this. So that's something that to keep in mind as well.
Definitely, yep. Are there any other questions on that one? I don't see anybody asking anything, so we're probably good to move on to the next one.
Thanks, Damon.
We got a bit of a quiet bunch today.
I know. Normally the chat is hopping. I can't keep up.
So this next question is about sequential visitor segmentation. So is there a way to create a segment that includes visitors who entered a website through a campaign, then clicked on a link in the same visit? Then I want to see everything the visitor did, including and after that visit. So, for example, a visitor meets my criteria. Can I see pages that visitors viewed after meeting my visit level criteria?
Oh. Okay, so let's see. So the way I would probably do this is by starting with a visitor level segment. So the very first kind of tier there.
Sorry, Megan, do you need this? Can I walk through it?
Oh yeah. That'd be. I'll read off my own screen. Yeah. So
cool.
That would be great. Yeah. So So starting with a visitor level segment, and then a visit level container within that. There you go. I would start with, your first criteria is entering through a certain campaign. So like campaign or tracking code, equals X. And then pulling in, I think they said clicking on a certain link. So we can pull in anything like that. And changing the and here to a then. Yep. So here, these are called sequential segments, where you specify your first criteria and your second criteria. Because your container is a visit, you're pulling in things that happened in the same visit, but because your larger container is visitor, you can pull in anything on the visitor level. And then the last step here is there's a little person icon, and we want to change that from include everyone to only after that sequence. Because you said, I think, these are the criteria you have to meet, and then after that, I want to be able to pull in any subsequent visit behavior for this visitor once they qualify for this segment. So yeah, and I think that's it.
Let's see if this will actually do anything.
Yeah.
So then we should still see that campaign tracking code, which is the one ending in 1026C, and then also see add to cart clicks. Which we do. Cool. I anything else from the chance that you want to add on to this question?
Damon added a few points.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't see my points on there anymore. It's like they
Might
keep
just-
going. But I can speak to them. Yeah, so that's something that I get requests around probably the most frequently. And I've seen a few questions around this that are pretty similar where you're trying to figure out, if somebody came in a certain way, did they click on something and then did they go and do these things? And so the then-based segments becomes very powerful to see those, to see that information. You could also look at a table. So if you created a table with leads, for example, so that's something that seems to be at the bottom of the funnel, right, or lower on the funnel. And if you were to drop in, let's say, page path, you'll only see page paths that contain the event where a lead can be created. I tried to do it with form completes on this data set, and it came up with interesting values. But for here, like you see this information, you see a lot of thank yous, right? And that's because the lead event has occurred here in this location. Now, if you wanted to understand, though, what is the impact of, say, the homepage to conversion, right? Or if you don't have the correct setup, like you don't have a persisting EVAR setup for something like page lead, then you're stuck having to create a bunch of segments that are visit-based or then-based segments to see that attribution downstream. Or you can go to leads and click on the alternate attribution. So if you go to the gear there, and click use non-default attribution model at the bottom and select participation and visit. When you do this, then the data of what you're seeing on the left-hand side changes. And if you drag visits as a second metric, you could start to see items that have maybe higher visit volume, right? If you prioritize on visits, you'll see like the most visited pages, but then also what is the impact, the downstream impact that page has at a participation level to those visits. And you have to be careful in what you're selecting from an attribution standpoint. I often like to use visit-based because you see what happened in that singular session, right? And so this is often how we can see, the impact that, like, say, the homepage has, which doesn't have a form on it or doesn't have a lead generating event on it, right? What is its impact downstream? And the segment that you would create out of this to match this data is similar to what the segments we were just talking about. It is a then-based segment where first you had to have hit that page, and then you continued on to execute on whatever the event is. And that's the audience you're seeing, if that makes sense. So,
Megan, do we want to get back to the other question from Puneet? There's some interesting twists that you can get into around that. You've got to qualify that question in a couple of different ways, just because by asking that, it depends on your case. I guess you're in what case you ask that. For instance, depending, like in an e-com situation or even a longer term situation, for instance, like what kind of a conversion. And I'll give you a for instance. So think about Kroger in grocery. So we have people that will literally put things into their cart and they will wait an entire week before converting. So if you think about that, so time spent on a page or time spent period, if they don't convert for 3-5 days, how do you think about that as a time spent and then your conversion as your indicator? You're gonna have to take a lot of things into account when you do your time spent in relation to your conversion. So that's going to be very different from somebody who goes to a site that has a very quick conversion in relation to that specific thing. So you're really going to have to take into account what it is that you're thinking about when it comes to that kind of a metric. So I should say it's very subjective in what you're doing or what you're thinking about when it comes to that situation. So I'll put it to the other people in this group, but I think it really comes down to the situation when it comes to that.
Like having that context.
Yeah, it makes sense. Especially depending on the audience too, and if it's a visit-based audience versus visitor, definitely.
Yeah,
Or
and
if
you
you're
want
B2B.
to have the context of like, okay, we just put in a change on our site. Is this a change we think will, just common sense, right? Do we want this change to make people spend more time on the site because we're like created an article, or we beefed up the content on the page, or did we put in what we think is a time saving or efficiency or reducing clicks for the customer, and we expect time spent to go down, right? So like depending on your use case for whatever feature you just built is one thing that's going to help you measure the impact of that. Like, okay, good, it's having the desired effect or an unintended effect, which may not be bad, but may not be what you thought was going to happen.
Time spent could also indicate that you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of different things going on.
Yeah. I would always say, just an additional point to this, especially when you're changing things that could greatly impact things like time spent and bounce.
Agreed.
Test it first. Like, always test, right? So you should always have, if possible, right, lower environments to be testing changes on. And that way, you're not suffering from the standpoint of your production data getting corrupted, right? So as much as possible, it always makes sense to test.
Great point. Always be testing.
I read so much into these things so much. It's very bad.
Yeah. You end up like 5 hours later wondering what happened.
I know. It's like, this permutation. Yeah.
And did we finish on the sequential segment or the segment stuff? Anyone else have any comments to add to that one?
Just that I have had very complicated audiences, right, that you can, or segments, sorry, that you can create in that, right? So you could say, if you are really, really wanting to see the attribution of things prior to some conversion event, and you want to do that in mass, you can create your audience such that you could say, and these events do not exist, right, prior, and then the then-based statement is made, and then you could say, and, these events could have happened, right, greater than or are equal to or greater than 0, right? So there's a lot of tips and tricks around that. Highly recommend using it, but play with it and make sure to double and triple check your data and what you get.
What are some of the ways you double and check that data, Damon?
So I use Venn charts often, right? Venn overlap charts to see if my audience didn't somehow accidentally go outside of the bounds of what I'm thinking, right? Like, for example, if I'm making an audience based off of people who've been to XYZ types of pages, right? And I wanted to see the attribution of those pages to a form complete, often is a common case in my B2B site. If I make a lot of then-based statements, and it starts to get crazy, right? You have tons of containers and you start to lose track when you're looking up and down what's actually in there. I will do just a gut check against the basic Venn overlap, where you just have your set of pages that's visit based, and see if from a Venn overlap standpoint, they are still nested inside. Because the more specific you get, the smaller your audience should be. And it should, in theory, fit in your larger original segment that was more simple. If it starts to go outside of that, then you just may want to check to make sure you aren't accidentally including stuff that doesn't exactly mean what you were going for. I've broken my segments before, and you have to go back and kind of retrace your steps.
Nice.
I also find that Venn overlaps too are more for that purpose, at least for me. I haven't found too many cases where I show it to people or it's part of a presentation. Usually use it as more of a detective tool, to find out, hey, we installed demand base, and I'm looking at SMB versus enterprise. They should never overlap, right? And so if you see an overlap, then something's wrong with the dimension. Yeah. Yep. For a second, I thought you had 4 circles in there, and I was wondering how on earth you did that.
Cool. We'll move on to the next question then. This is about data layers. We have several search categories coded to the data layer of our website, detailing product selections. These were not coded entirely consistently. For example, hotel plus flightless spaces, hotel plus flight without spaces. How do we combine these in the report suite components or rename a product category?
Yeah, so I can share my thoughts. Again, others feel free to chime in. Some ways I could think about going in to try to kind of clean this up are, one, using a classification in the classification rule builder and using some kind of regex to separate them out into different subclassifications to try to catch those different scenarios. A classification importer might work depending on how the data is structured. Like if you had a table of the data that you knew was right and you could import that instead of relying on your data layer. You could also try using a processing rule to put them in the different variables or to overwrite the value of them with one consistent value. And then you could also potentially write rules in Adobe Launch that ignored the spaces. Like I'm not a developer, so you'd have to ask their opinion on if they could do that or not. But the data layer is only, at least in our case, what's feeding Adobe Launch, and Adobe Launch is where we actually put it into the different Adobe variables. So there could be that middle step of Adobe Launch where it's fixing what's in the data layer and before it gets out to the UI. Those are some thoughts I had. Anyone else have others?
Yeah, classifications are great. I've used to classify my way out of a bunch of entanglements.
Yeah.
Especially list vars.
Cool. Your answer was just so great, Megan, that you covered everything. Okay. Anything coming through to the chat yet? Looks like we're good.
Looks like we're caught up.
Cool. I'll come back to this one because it was my question. I want to make sure we have all the other ones answered. But this is a question that came through for the MIA office hours, so we'll just touch on it here. Within Adobe Analytics, how do you best address the exclusion of bots by using Adobe Analytics segments? Just curious what others are doing. I'm also curious to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, some ways we exclude bots are making sure that IAB bot filtering is checked. That's in the Adobe administration. That it's an international bot list of any recognized bot. I think both good and bad bots are there. It doesn't help stop them from crawling your site just from that data getting into your Adobe Analytics report suite. You can also, like if there's stuff that's not catching that you want to exclude, you can go to the general admin settings and exclude by IP. And then there are several options there that you can take advantage of. You can exclude by IP, a range of IPs, uploading the document, like a spreadsheet of those things, or by user agent. Another thing you could do is potentially use a virtual report suite to create a separate report suite that has the different types of bot traffic, either included or excluded, depending on your use case. Just beware, like virtual report suites are awesome and they have most of the same powers as a regular report suite. There are a couple different limitations, like some around data warehouse, etc. So just, look at the documentation for that. And then you can pull IP address out of data warehouse if you need to look at any different type of reporting based on IPs. For some ideas I have.
Yeah, I believe we have it done in segmentation. I know, if we had Nick on this call, he'd be able to speak a little bit better to that for Kroger. I know that we've got so we actually have a CJA. We're migrating over to CJA. But interestingly enough, we have data views where we have to, depending upon what we've got, we have to turn off bot filtering in some cases. So if there's anybody out there that's actually in the process of doing some of those things, you might have to look at certain cases, whether or not you have to have bot filtering on or off. At least we did with one of our situations because of one of our third-party sites. Bot filtering was causing some problems for us in one situation. So with our reporting, which I found fascinating. I'm not as up on some of that, so you might want to do some and understanding as how that affects your reporting. So yes, that's an important thing to understand, how it actually reports or how it affects your reporting. But that's that's a really good thing to be more informed about, which I haven't done as much reading. So, but all good stuff to know.
Mm-hmm. I put some stuff in the chat as well. Both at SolarWinds, where I've previously worked, and also here at CrowdStrike, we've have third-party tools. Like one is Check. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but Check. And then another one was Square Shield, which is a lesser-known one. In both cases, they were able to allow for capturing within EVARs, their data set, so you could see information about the user agent that got into, is it a malicious bot? Is it a crawler? Is it an automation tool that's your own internal team's automation tool? Things like that. And so it got into like a granular definition and more of a general type, like bots, bad actors, all that stuff. So if that is something within the budget of your team, or if you may not know, right, but there may be some tools that are implemented that you just don't know about. You can take advantage of those tools and actually have data elements created that would pipe into your EVARs, right? And you could use that depending on how robust it is, like device fingerprinting information and things like that. It can get pretty detailed, and you may want to consume one of your list vars if it's important enough to you. But Check is very general. It doesn't deserve a list var, at least from the data you could capture on the website. So I found it to be powerful because sometimes you don't want to exclude bots. You just want to exclude malicious bots, or if you wanted to see people, right? But we've had it powerful enough that you could use some of those tools to actually see questionable user agents and actually look at them and see where they're going on your site too. So that's on the flip side,
Yep. No, we actually have Megan, to your point, we also have the Azure level of security on our implementation. So like I said, Nick would be able to speak a little bit better to some of those things. Just because I'm an Adobe champion doesn't mean that I know everything. That's one of the things that I will say right off the bat. So each of us have different strengths, that is for sure. So
yeah, we rely heavily on our partnership with like our information and cybersecurity teams. Because we're catching stuff in Adobe sometimes, but also like they have monitoring on their side to say like, hey, this
Yep.
looks like malicious traffic, or even like a good crawler, right? There are good bots out there, and you want them to crawl your site, but you might not want their data mixed in with your customer data because that's going to hurt your conversion rates and stuff like that. So,
Yep.
but yeah, like leverage those partnerships and those other tools to help you find bots as well. And then if you do find like a range of IPs from this other thing that this other tool identified, you can go in Adobe and take those various steps to block them.
Great.
In Adobe, also Flash. I think this is like a newer dimensions, but the bot name from the rules that you have set up in your admin are also available, so you can see how much traffic these bots that you've already identified are bringing in.
That's a great call out. There's also now, I'm just remembering, which we can show in a minute, in the reports section of your like workspace landing page, there are those kind of like preset reports. Bots is one of them. I've used this once or twice, but yes, right here. So yeah, reports, and now I'm gonna look silly because I don't remember where it is, but there we go. Yeah, but yeah, this will kind of at least give you, what Adobe is saying is a bot, or like, and it gives you a template for some of the stuff they're reporting on. And then obviously if you know more information, you can go add to this, but this could give you a helpful starting point. Doesn't look like any bot traffic's being captured in Adobe's sandbox data, but probably in all of our real world data sets, this won't be empty, but that could be a good place to start to do some analysis.
For those of you that have like a custom segment and you're using a report suite, or just whether it's just a segment applied, how often are you updating that bot filter based off new traffic that you're seeing?
Not very often, honestly, because the bot filtering rules are generally doing their job. It's just like if something gets by that, it's like ad hoc, right? As we find stuff, which, like I said, is a partnership between like my team and other users, but also cybersecurity. So, as needed, I guess. Sometimes it's like, a couple times a month. Sometimes we'll go for like 6 months without any updates.
Yeah, I asked because at Echo we went through like a string of like every month we had to update the bot traffic, and then also we had to update our clickstream data to replicate what we were doing on the workspace side, and it led to this crazy mess of like just untrust of the data and like what are the bots doing this week.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah, whenever I see a spike, that's the first thing I do is first I drop city. And 9 times out of 10, it's always one city, right? Or one specific geo, right?
Yep.
And then you can get into, okay, well, let's look at browser version, like by the type, how many browser instances ago. And you could really get into specifics. And then again, if you have a tool, that gives you more information, you could then call out the common segment and then make that as a permanent part of your exclusions to, protect you against future incidences from that type of a bot.
Yep. Yeah, we just had a weird issue with like different really old mobile devices that we had to go and create a custom segment for. I guess one last option here, if you get really desperate, none of the other things work, is you could pay Adobe to write a Vista rule for you and block them if you can identify a segment that they can use.
Oh, so you wouldn't get the like analytics server call hit.
No.
Right. Yeah. Because even
the Vista rules, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And to Damon's point, just more like fuel into that, investing in a third-party tool that will help hopefully block some of that traffic higher in the funnel, so you're not wasting your server calls on bots. Cool. All right. Any last thoughts on bots? I feel like I know I have lots of questions, and on them could spend whole office hours just on boss. Okay, I'll move on to our last question that we have ready. This is actually from me. I just wanted to learn from you guys on how you guys were preparing for the holiday season in the retail world. We just passed Black Friday, so any learnings you had from Black Friday ahead for just gearing up for Christmas?
Yeah. This one's always interesting for me because, like in the, especially used car retail, right? Like the holiday time is not actually our busy season. It's tax time. You know, folks use their down payments for, or their tax refunds for down payments. But in general, so I'd say like any time of the year that's busy for you or your company, I would proactively QA your tagging on all like your product pages or purchase funnels or whatever is important, like your most important KPIs, to make sure that your tagging is working, set up, good to go into that holiday or important time frame for you. So you're not one weekend and like, oh no, that stuff's broken. So, right, you can't QA your whole site. You can't proactively QA every single tag, but pick a handful of your most important KPIs and check that out. Same, like set alerts ahead of time, stuff like that. Stuff you should be doing kind of year round anyway. I also say getting any tagging updates before any company code freezes or other blackouts that you're subject to, or when like just lots of people are on time away. Like if there's something you know you got to have to measure, some Black Friday campaign, etc. You know, get that in there. Make some of the stuff is just kind of more common sense, right? Like don't release anything sensitive or any tagging change, or like even I think make big like marketing channel changes during the holidays, because it's so easy to just do one little thing that's not quite right in marketing channels and blow those up. So if you can wait, I would say wait till after the holidays to make those changes. And then like if you have Adobe Target, you can take advantage of the auto allocate setting on step 2 of the setup. Auto allocate is a feature that helps you get to winning experiences faster. It's particularly helpful when you have more than 2 or 3 variants, right? But when you have several, like maybe holiday campaign offers you're going out with, you have this limited time window. Like Black Friday is only one day, or Cyber Monday is only one day, but otherwise, you know, it's still like a couple weeks of holiday time that you're trying to take advantage of, and you don't want to waste traffic going to any losing or poor or performing variants if you don't have to. So auto allocate, what that does is helps kind of immediately eliminate those bad experiences and only funnel traffic to the better performing ones. It still runs the A/B tests like on those winning ones. It just like if you have 7 experiences, it's probably going to eliminate like 4 of them right off the bat. That's just one helpful non-Adobe Analytics way, but different, but Adobe Target way to tip that I'd give. And then Damon, sometimes when we share these things, they go away. Let me post Damon's thoughts.
I tried to post them, and it's probably too long. I need to make it less wordy. We had our first Cyber Monday, at least to the magnitude that we did it this year. And definitely there were some learnings, like check your audiences, right? So like for Target and anything that's delivered by Target, you can, yeah, there you go. Oh, you broke it up? Okay, perfect, thanks.
Sure.
This is like a over 1,000 character block.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing is definitely check your audiences, right? And you have your real-time based audiences in Target, and you have your historical ones in Adobe that you can push over, right, as an audience. And what I often do is I'll run a validation test first in Target, and this doesn't even have to be Target. It could be Optimizely. If you have another tool, heaven forbid you would do something horrible like that. I'm just kidding. But you run your audience and just do a validation test. like make a space, one small modification, and push play, and then see in Adobe, on the page that it's firing on, what your audience is as reported by Adobe for the same time period. And this is an example where you use your Venn overlap, right? So you see Adobe, page A, your audience, and that's what should be in your test. And then you see your test and make an audience just out of that and see what the Venn overlap is. And that's how I've often detected really huge match rate issues. My personal experience is Target will never get 100% of your audience that it's supposed to, but the match rate could be very high, like in your 90s, right? When you start to get into things like 6 Sense or demand base, that's where you need to be kind of careful and make sure that you're testing those audiences well in advance and make sure that what you're expecting is actually what's receiving the experience. And so doing that testing ahead of time, testing your UTM parameters and stuff like that on your ad links, checking that your conversion tags and launch are firing properly. It's a laundry list, but these things are definitely better to check in advance. And then last, I would say, if you can, precede your reporting for things like Black Friday or Cyber Monday well in advance, so that when the time comes, it's already there. Because I have found that you get all these requests for other niche reports that had nothing to do with what you thought during that time, but you still need your base report. So trying to get ahead of it. And if you don't have a big team, like I'm just a team of one right now, that matters because there's only so much time in the day. So that's my feedback.
Yeah, that's great, Damon. I just thought it was interesting as both you guys are going through your answers that it changed based off of like what your experiences were. So like Megan's was very like tagging implementation recommendations. My immediate thought like went to like anomaly alerts creating and like to Demon's Point, like the reporting setup. I think as well, and a suggestion is to get your like main stakeholders or people who really care about the metrics together and just do like a quick refresher on the popular dashboards that you have for your site, and just make sure everyone's like good with like the data callouts that you would have had prior.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Even going through stuff with your PMs and things like that. And some of the we have special holiday reporting that we do at this time of the year. And it was funny. It was because of that holiday reporting that I actually found that Adobe had a broken. They actually have a broken component, and so that was that was actually kind of interesting finding that, reporting it to Adobe. So kind of a heads up to everybody. If you're using the key metric summary in any of your reporting, don't use it because the key metric summary right now, the percentage in it is calculating incorrectly. So it will actually be incorrect in comparison. In fact, if you hit the information button, it'll tell you what it's using, and it's like way off. So just a heads up to anybody. I think I even put a post out on Experience League for everybody as a heads up too. But yeah, it was really weird.
Do they pick up bug requests like that? I see feature requests, so I don't know.
I don't know. Since it was something that was already a known issue, I was able to immediately contact the guy that I was working with in customer care in the past, and I said, "Hey, problem." And so they immediately went ahead and started working on it, and they put it in as a customer care ticket after the fact. Normally they would say, "Hey, you need to go ahead and submit a ticket and all that stuff." If I normally, but they fast tracked it. So, but yeah, this one was a problem in the past. So I don't know why it just all of a sudden started happening again. So I complained about it badly the very first time. It's kind of nice when you have Adobe champion status and you complain about a problem. There, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, we'll take a look at it for you.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, just a little bit more priority for them to take a look at these problems.
Yeah,
it's nice when that happens.
I know.
Yes.
To Jeff's point, like I think I mentioned, like proactively QA your tagging. To Jeff's point, like
yes,
run your holiday reporting in advance to make sure it all works, right?
Yeah. But take a look at your other stuff too. I mean, take a look at your reports too, because
the reports,
take a look at what's actually going on with the report itself, because but guess what? Sometimes things actually break. Adobe stuff breaks too. So every so often, keep an eye on all of it. Never know.
Watch the status page.
Set up alerts for any of those main, KPIs you're going to be monitoring, so you can find them. Like Jeff, I think Jeff mentioned, like meet with your PMs like well in advance, right? Like what campaigns do you want to run during the time so you don't get hit with 20 requests all at once, each all due within a week. Like, okay, we're still, whoever's your team, right? We're still only one team. I'm one analyst. Like,
yes,
we need a priority and a queue, and I need to know about these things well in advance so that I can either build the tagging, build the reporting stuff well ahead of time.
And don't assume that a report that you used last time is going to work this time with somebody. Oh, we used that last time. You mean it didn't work? And you might have to review that with them, and because they might want something a little bit different. Never know.
Yeah, 100%.
Always make sure that it's relevant this time around.
And before it's going on the screen for presenting in front of the exec team or whatever. Yeah. Live and learn.
Cool. Well, we're at the hour. Feels like a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks everyone for your time. Thanks to all the people who submitted questions. We'll see you on the next one.
Alrighty.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Great holiday.